See that this is identical to House Bill 314 with some very, very crucial changes that needed to happen. When the gentleman on the second floor vetoed House Bill 314, he gave me a phone call and he said, there's two things that need to be addressed. I said, okay, Mr. Governor, what do we got? So he brought up two issues. The first issue is that he didn't want there to be any frivolous lawsuits. His second issue was he did not want any library in Idaho to go bankrupt. So we've addressed those two key components that he requested in this legislation. So issue number one, I'll direct your attention to page 3, starting at line 6, subpoints B and C. And what you're going to see here is that we've instituted a 30-day written relocation requirement form. You might hear some libraries say they already have a policy like this in place. And although that is true, not every library has that. It is a good policy. It is a good practice. And so what we're doing here is we're codifying that by making it a requirement. If you are, for example, in the children's section, you find a piece of material that you believe is harmful to minors, you would grab that piece of material, take it to the front desk, fill out a 30-day written relocation form. Library boards usually meet monthly. Some of them meet bi-monthly. They then would review that form, the request, and then they would either agree with you and relocate that material to a section in the library that's not accessible to minors. And in that case, the problem goes away and everybody moves on. If they disagree with you and they say, no, that piece of material is going to stay right there, you can either accept that as the person who's filed that and move along yourself, or you have the right to go file a civil cause of action and challenge that. So the question would be, well, won't a private cause of action result in frivolous lawsuits? The answer is no, it won't. State courts have broad authority to throw out frivolous lawsuits and even punish citizens who file harassing lawsuits against the government. There is no evidence that causes of action created in order to protect against rights are misused to file frivolous and wasteful lawsuits. So addressing his issue number 2, what we did is we previously had $2,500 in damages awarded in House Bill 314. We have brought that all the way down to $250 in this bill. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative Crane. Are there questions for Representative Crane? Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Crane, thank you for all your work. But
crane to crane, huh?
Bringing that down to $250 sounds good, but the problem is the attorney's fees. Idaho Code 12120 allows for attorney's fees if a demand is made 10 days before filing a lawsuit. And the attorney's fees, I won't say always, but usually after the lawsuit is resolved, seem to way exceed $2,500 or $250. Is there any provision in this? And of course, the filing fee is going to be about $225. And so with all of these expenses, is there any control in your provision here over the amount that the attorneys can charge and that the amount the court can award? For example, if you went to small claims court, it would be considerably different and be more expeditious too.
Representative Crane.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon, this legislation does not make mention of attorney's fees. Still, in some civil cases, attorney fees may be awarded to the prevailing party at the judge's discretion.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Crane, under 12120, the discretion is much more limited because, and I would just throw that out the committee to go read. It's 12120 parens 1. And if you make your 10-day demand letter, then the prevailing party gets attorney's fees. And unfortunately, this bill has no cap on that, especially if one party was prolonged the effort. But
thank you. First time I've heard an attorney in the committee argue to cap their fees, but appreciate that. Representative Barbieri.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Crane, I want to focus on the notice. Is it possible that a library could insist on a certain form that notice be made and then reject mere letters or notes that would raise this issue?
Member of Alec.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Barbieri. There's no formatting in this bill as to what that 30-day written relocation form would look like.
Okay, I think I'll reserve that question for a librarian if they testify. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further? Representative Andrus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Crane, my question, I've gotten a lot of emails about concerns that encyclopedias will now be moved into adult sections. What in this protects educational material that some may consider offensive, but the majority find educational and appropriate?
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Andrus. That's a great question. I had several comments made at myself. Who are you to decide? And I'm not. If you look on page 1 of the legislation, and you can start at line 36, this is already Idaho statute, everything on page 1. This is what Idaho code since 1972. That's when this was passed. That's what we say obscene materials. This is all the definitions. But specifically to answer your question, Representative Andrus, if you look at line 36, it says the prurient interest, and you go on down to the next line 37, applying contemporary community standards. That is the Miller test, prong number 1. That's used by the Supreme Court of the United States to decide what is obscene and what is not obscene. No. If you go on down to line 41, you'll see patently offensive. That is the Miller test, prong number 2. And if you go to the next page where you get to line 9 and line 10, you're going to see literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. That is the Miller test, prong number 3. So in the case of the encyclopedia, it would fit literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Those are the Miller tests. And I will add, this is a note in my closing remarks, but I will add that was a request in this legislation. I've met with parents, I've met with librarians, I've met with school people, all interested parties. Everybody got something they wanted in this legislation. And one of the requests from the school folks was that the Miller test was included as a means to decide what was and was not obscene. And so it is in this legislation. It's already codified in Idaho Code 1815-14, as you see there.
Any further questions? Chair has a question. I've been getting emails and questions about your bill, Representative. One of the things that happened last year and is a narrative that's carried over this year is you're banning books. Can you speak to that narrative? Is there a provision in here? Are you banning books or are you relocating books? What are you doing with regards to books that would be potentially called into question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great question. If you look throughout,
of course it is, because the chair asked.
Absolutely. If you look throughout this legislation, you will not find the word ban or burn or anything of that nature in this legislation. This is a relocation bill. So there's no book banning. There's no book burning. This creates a process that is fair for both parties. One side may want certain materials in the library, and the other side may not. Both are taxpayers. Both have a vested interest in the library and the materials that are in them. Both have different worldviews. What we have to do is compromise.
Worldview.
Keeping all the material in the library is what this legislation does, and just relocating it to its rightful location within the library is satisfying to all parties.
Just to drill further, so you're telling me that if I find a book offensive and I fill out this form, that they are not removing the book, they're just simply relocating the book somewhere in the library?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. You would simply fill out the form, they'll relocate it to somewhere else in the library.
Thank you. Further question, Representative Gannon.
Just one other question, Mr. Chairman.
I don't believe that.
So I'm concerned about the definition
Florida
of
banned 300 books.
Harmful to minors, because harmful to minors is used in 1517B with regard to several different violations that can occur.
Representative Gannon, could you point for the committee where you're at in that?
Okay. Harmful for minors is defined on line 31 through 42 on page 1, and also line 1 through 16 of page 2.
Okay, thank you.
And then harmful for minors is a term that is used to create liability or responsibility. Let's use that term under the 1517, which is the Children's School and Library Protection Act. And it's used on line 41, line 46, and line 47. So when I look at the definition of harmful for minors, there's one that's kind of specific, subsection A, but then subsection B is a second definition that can be used for harmful for minors, and it seems like it's quite broad. It says the quality of any material or of any performance or of any description or representation of whatever form, which as a whole has the dominant effect of substantially arousing sexual desires in persons under the age of 18 years old. It seems like that's a very, very subjective definition. Could you comment on that, on why you think that would be justified in this bill?
Representative Crane.
Chairman Crane, Representative Gannon. So again, if you'll go back to page 1, like you referenced, line 31, which is point 6, this is Idaho statute since 1972. If you want to revisit that would be a total different bill. I'm not repealing any part of Idaho code. So I'm simply referring back to those definitions. But I would further comment that we're talking about children, and we're talking about something that is of the prurient interest, which is, if you look at the word prurient, it would be excessive. So I would comment, we are talking about children, and we're talking about excessive.
Any further questions? Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so under line 6, it says, in its meaning, one or both of the following. So it could be either, harmful to minors can be either subsection A or it can be subsection B. And so I'm just focusing on subsection B, and I'm not seeing the term prurient interest in there. And the second thing, and maybe this was enacted in 1972, but in 1972 there was no lawsuit, no private right of action attached to the law. So we're considerably expanding what can happen in this in this particular bill, and maybe it would be good to revisit if we're going to allow this kind of broad language to be a lawsuit.
Representative Crane, you care to
thoughts?
comment or respond on that?
I didn't hear a question, Mr. Chairman, so no comment.
Do you want to rephrase and ask a question there, Representative Gannon?
No, I think I made the point, and
Okay.
if Representative Crane wants to respond, that's great.
All right. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Crane, I'm just curious. So this bill addresses government, libraries, the government, Also, what about people in the library that may be, I don't know, maybe there's a pedophile that hangs out at the libraries in the kids section. Does it address anything like that? Or is there anything in here that could target someone like that?
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Scott. No, this is simply materials. That's what we're addressing here. We're not addressing people, staff members, nothing like that. We are simply addressing the material itself. And again, to reinforce that, no material will be banned, no material will be burned. It will simply be relocated to a proper section. So no, it doesn't address any personnel. Thank you for the question.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Representative Crane. We're going to go ahead and start public testimony. So as we said at the start of it, we'll go till 10:45, Representative Crane, and then you'll be allowed 5 minutes to wrap up and answer any questions. First up today, we have Isabella Burgess. You'll be given 2 minutes a day for public testimony. Isabella could possibly be in the other room, so what I'll do is I'll state the next two names that will be up. Justin Prescott and Mary Ruck. Those are the three names. Mary, you're already here. If you want to go ahead and start while we're waiting on Isabella and Justin, that would be great. Next up after Isabella, Justin, and Mary will be Jackie Davidson. So state your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
My name is Mary Lee Rush. It's spelled R-U-C-H, but it doesn't follow any phonetic rules. I am a retired teacher from Idaho, from Coeur d'Alene. I was an educator for 43 years. I am also a reading specialist, and I am also a former president of the Idaho, help me out, Representative Coberly, Idaho National Reading Association. The Idaho Reading Association. Anyway, thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for explaining the bill to me. I'm glad we're not banning books. I'm glad we're not burning books. But as a former middle school teacher, my 6th through 8th graders want to go to that room wherever you're putting those books. And they're going to want to check every single one of them out. My question is, where do parents come into the formula here? This is not a library problem. It's a parent problem. If a parent does not want their child to read a book, they can take that book away from them. You don't ban the book or put it in a special room and take it away from everybody else. I think we're missing a problem here.
Thank you, Mary. That's
I'm
exceeded
sorry.
your time. Are there
Sorry.
questions for Mary? Seeing none. Next up will be Isabella Burgess, followed by Justin Prescott.
Wait, that's actually me. That was a different Mary. That's Mary.
Well, Mary quite
R-U-C-H.
contrary.
I know.
You know?
I feel a tiny bit contrary about that.
All right. So we will, here's the problem I've got. So I apologize, Mary.
Okay.
I have to click on a name up here
I know,
to get the timer started so you can see the countdown. And I don't have another Mary in my queue to grab. So I will run the timer on my
Sure,
phone, if that's
fine.
okay, and I'll give you a heads
I'm
up.
written. I'm fine.
I appreciate your indulgence of the chair here. So whenever you're ready, Mary, just state your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Crane and committee members. My name actually is Mary Ruck. I have lived in Boise for 8 years, and I'm speaking in opposition to House Bill 384, and I'm speaking for myself. I am the grandmother of 2 elementary school-age girls whom I love dearly. They are thriving in the Boise public school system, and both are avid readers and patrons of our terrific Boise public library system. I expect and trust their parents to exercise age-appropriate control over the books the girls read. I also expect and trust their parents to care for the girls' developing minds and answer any questions they might have about things they read in books, see on the TV, the internet, or hear in public spaces. I do not want a very small group of citizens and politicians to be the arbiters of what books are acceptable to be in school and public libraries and where they're placed in a library. We in Idaho do not need to enable disgruntled individuals to take legal action when their demands to remove or move certain books are not met. That will financially hurt our libraries and schools, as well as take precious time away from the good work that librarians and educators are doing. I actually did not get what I wanted from Representative Jay Crane, contrary to what he said. I ask that you vote no on this bill, stand up for freedom and reason, trust and allow parents to care for their children, and let's work on improving literacy rates instead of working on this fabricated problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Are there questions for Mary? Oh, sorry, folks. We don't allow any, these are very sensitive and sometimes emotional topics that we deal with in committee. And so we don't allow any expression to try to keep the emotion down and just deal with the facts, ma'am, so to speak.
Where
So,
can I get
Mary,
that?
we'll have a page. She can come grab that. But I do have a question for you. What would you have liked Representative Crane to include in the bill or exclude from the bill? Or what, you said he didn't.
You hit it. I would like him to remove this bill.
Okay, all right, no problem. Appreciate that. Questions? I've got Representative Young and then Representative Skog. Have questions for you, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mary, thank you for being here. I'm just curious to know, do you believe that graphic sexual content is harmful to minors?
Mary?
Oh, what a loaded question.
Boy, that's a tough one because I'm not sure who's defining graphic sexual content. So I'm not sure I'd be able to answer that clearly for you.
Very good.
Okay. Representative Skog.
I'll call you by your first name because I forgot the last
Absolutely.
name. So
Ruck is
forgive
so
me.
easy.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Ms. Ruck, what is it in the bill that you don't like? If you could share that with me, I'd appreciate it.
I especially don't like the cause of civil action, but I don't know that this is really currently a problem. I don't believe that it actually exists. I think there's processes in place. Libraries are already working on this.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Ruck, for being
Thank
here
you.
today. So next up, I have Isabella Burgess, Justin Prescott, Jackie Davidson, Robert Wright. State your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Crane. My name is Isabella Burgess. I'm representing myself. All right. As I said, my name is Isabella. I'm a college student, a District 22 constituent, and an associate librarian at the Meridian Library District. I'm speaking today in opposition of House Bill 384. My library district, among many others across the state, hires minors at 16 and 17. If this bill goes into effect, there will be members of our staff who will be legally barred from handling some of our material. From a staffing standpoint, this impact is immediate. There is no justifiable reason for undue burden that this will put on the adult staff members because our teen employees will be legally unable to perform any of their work duties. This is also poses a challenge for our hold sections, especially in places that offer 24-hour holds pickup, like the Meridian Orchard Park branch. But beyond this, there's a larger structural problem with this bill. Representatives, the homophobia in this bill is blatant. This bill's definition of sexual conduct is incorrect and does not align with widely accepted definitions in any popular dictionary. Homosexuality does not equate to obscenity. It is your choice to sexualize children's books. It is absolutely essential that we have books that represent every member of our community that are accessible to every age range. In addition, gay people will not go away. You cannot erase us with this bill. We have always been here. There will always be families with 2 moms or 2 dads seeking out literature that represents them, and that is an expressed need. If I am forced to comply with this bill, I will be failing to serve my community's needs, and it will not be my fault. I believe my duty to the people I serve is more important than temperance and morality. So representatives, I implore you, come to story time, hop on a bookmobile, see what evil you're supposedly fighting.
Thank you, Isabel. Are there questions for Isabel? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Isabel, it sounds like you have a book in mind that you're afraid you're going to have to remove, and I'm not aware of what that would be. Can you share that with me?
Isabella?
Well, there's a variety of picture books that have 2 moms on the covers. There's one that I can think of specifically that is called I Love My 2 Moms. So that would be put in the adult section under the definition of this bill.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Representative Young.
I had 3 moms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Isabella, can you point us to the language in this bill that you believe would preclude the books that you've just talked about?
Isabella?
Yes,
No,
sorry.
You're fine. It's fine. This is all news, so don't worry.
Thank you, Representative Young. This is going to be on page 1, line 22. Number 3 under sexual conduct means any act of masturbation, homosexuality, etc., etc.
Okay. Any further questions? Representative Coberly, first day on the job. Welcome to House State Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Burgess, in your library, at your library, is there a process in place for patrons to ask for reconsideration of a book that's in your collection?
Isabella?
Yes, thank you, Representative Corberly. We have a process at our library. There is a written and online form that would be submitted and then reviewed by our director.
Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Isabella, was there an election in your library district last year? And could you describe what the results of the election were?
I'm going to let that question stand, but I think you are asking a question you know the answer to.
Well, yes, I do.
Yeah. That's called leading the witness. It's
Are you
not
a
supposed to
lawyer?
happen, but we're going to allow it. The chairman's in a good mood this morning, so I'll allow it.
I want to bring that out for the committee's benefit.
I know it's
so they would know.
Because some of them aren't from the Treasure Valley, and that is an important thing that they understand. So, yes, go ahead.
Yes, so I can only speak to the process that goes on in Meridian, but we do have an election that any citizen of Meridian can vote for our board members. Yeah, to answer quickly.
I think where the representative was going was there was an election that took place. Could you tell us the results of that election? I think is what he was looking for. Okay.
So we had 2 people who were incumbents and they were reelected. Does that answer the question?
Okay, perfect. I have a question for you. You brought up something so we discussed libraries quite a bit in this committee, so become fairly familiar with the issue. But you brought up an interesting topic that I've not heard in all the discussion, and that is your employees and your ability. This would harm your ability to hire 16, 17-year-old, I think minor children. Is that correct? Okay, so we have to wrestle with state policy here. One of the policies that we has been discussed is the ability to allow minors to sell alcohol as well, or to not sell it, but be a waiter and deliver an alcoholic beverage. Currently, state statute prohibits minors from taking a beer to somebody or taking a hard drink to somebody. You know, they can work in the establishment, they can't take alcohol until they're 18. Do you think it's wise that the state puts policies in place like that, like with alcohol? Same thing here. Do you think it's a good idea that we put some of those provisions in place for minors so that they're not around materials or around beverages until they reach the age of 18?
I did that in
Well,
Germany.
I can't speak to the alcohol situation, but I was hired at the age of 16 at Meridian Library District. I never was ever bothered with any material that I shelved, that I checked out to people. And we have, I would estimate 5 high schoolers on our staff right now who love their job. It is a great after-school job. It is very meaningful. And I think it would be a shame to take that opportunity away from young people.
So I'll ask one more question. The chair's not supposed to ask many questions, but I'll ask because this is of interest to me. Could we, because those kids still stay employed but not handle adult books? Could they deal with age appropriate books for those kids? Would that be a barrier or a problem for your organization?
Well, it
Sure
depends
would,
on
stupid.
what we define as age appropriate, but our largest section is our adult section. And additionally, more things would be filed into our adult section. So it would be a large burden on our adult staff members.
Perfect. Thank you committee for indulging the chair. Next up, any further questions? Sorry. Thank you, Isabella, for your time today.
Thank you.
Justin Prescott, Jackie Davidson, Robert Wright, and Rachel Utzen. I probably got that wrong.
Crane,
Okay.
are you a prosecuting
Justin?
attorney?
Hi there.
Welcome to House State Affairs.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Justin Prescott. I'm a member of District 16, and I am here to represent myself. I am here as a librarian, a parent, and a member of the community. And I am concerned about the potential repercussions of House Bill 384. I believe it will diminish Idaho Library's ability to continue to successfully serve their communities. To define that, libraries successfully serve their communities by including materials in their collections that meet the needs of all people in their community, including minors. Providing access to books that are helpful for understanding complex issues. Books on controversial issues create opportunities and growth and learning, and help youth critically navigate their world. Libraries make knowledge and ideas available so that everyone has the freedom to choose what they read and the ability to form their own opinions. And libraries follow specific collection development policies that ensure fair and thoughtful decisions on what books go into a library collection. I believe that passing this bill would limit youth access to quality knowledge and information on virtually any topic. It would limit library workers' ability to provide young patrons with reliable, accurate materials that are relevant for their information needs. And I believe this bill would start a precedent for further limitations on people's freedom to choose where and how they get their information. I worked in libraries for over a decade. And I met many amazing library workers, librarians, library assistants, pages, all the way up to the director. I can tell you with certainty that none of them would ever knowingly do anything that would bring harm to a child. Our purpose as library workers, as information professionals, is to match each patron with the information that best suits their needs as individuals. We work in libraries because we believe in the power of community.
Mr. Prescott, I'm sorry, but your time has expired. Can you wrap it up here?
Yeah, last sentence. We want everyone to enjoy the freedom to learn about the world they live in and come to empathize with others who may have very different life experience from their own. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Prescott? Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Prescott, welcome to the committee. I'm going to ask the same question again that I asked earlier. Do you believe that graphic sexual content is harmful to minors?
Mr. Prescott.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Next up,
Like
will be
Michelangelo.
Jackie Davidson, followed by Robert
The
Wright,
statue of Michelangelo that's
Rochelle
in the
Utzon,
Louvre
and then Heidi Robbins.
in Paris. I've been there.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
Are you wanting to hand those out or?
No, I'll just show them to you.
Okay. State your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Crane and members of the committee. My name is Jackie Davidson, and I'm Precinct Committee Woman 1614, and I am here to speak in favor of the bill. I checked out some books this last Saturday at the library at Cole and Ustick, and I'm going to put these ones aside because I think you already know that they exist. They're grooming books and promoting homosexuality and gender dysphoria. What I'd really like to do is talk about this book. And I showed you this book last year when I testified, and it's called Red Hood. It's in the teen section of the library, at least in Cole and Ustick. And so it's been on the shelf for at least a year because I showed it to you last year. This book contains obscene sexual activities, violence, and profanity, and it's all through the book. It's rated 4 out of 4 for do not give to minors. And I just want to show you, this is a summary content warning. Rating Red Hood 4 out of 4, and these are the excerpts of the sexual content. So if you'd like this document, I would sure be willing to.
I'll have a page come grab that and hand that to Representative Holzclaw, and you can pass it around.
Okay. So I'm
sorry. Yep, you're under 18. You probably shouldn't grab that. Representative Holzclaw, would you mind to grab that?
Good call. And viewer discretion, I would advise on reading these excerpts. Yes, thank you. I'd like to give you a hypothetical instance. A 13-year-old boy selects a book
Ms.
from...
Davidson, I'm sorry, your time has expired.
Okay.
Can you summarize it real quick?
Well, I just ask that you pass the HB 184 to the floor with a new pass.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Are there questions? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Davidson, you mentioned you got those at a public library, and if so, which library?
It was a public library. It was the Cole and Ustick Library up on Cole. It's on the corner of Cole and Ustick in Boise.
Follow up. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Davison, for your testimony today. Next up is Robert Wright, followed by Rachel Utston, Heidi Robbins, Marcy Kerr.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Just state your name, who you represent.
I'm Robert Wright. I'm from the Idaho Falls Public Library.
Okay.
Usually when we come over here from Eastern Idaho, it's a little bit warmer. I don't know if you planned that or...
They knew you were coming. You brought the snow with you.
Yeah, probably.
All right.
I just want to say up front, good people can disagree on topics. I don't think there's anybody here that isn't invested in the interest of children. We may disagree the best way to do that, but I think that's important to realize that good people can disagree. I'm here to speak against 384. I did speak with Representative Crane on the phone for about an hour earlier this month, and I think he's well-intentioned. I think you're all well-intentioned. I think the practical part of implementing this bill is problematic. I work in Idaho Falls Public Library. We're one of the largest libraries in Eastern Idaho. We can't afford to do this. We cannot afford to have a separate area for just adults. We have a ramp that goes up to the third floor where the adult materials are. We have an elevator that's not in sight of any staff members that people that are disabled can use. So our solution, if this were to pass in its current form, is to bar anyone under 18 from the top floor of the library without their parents. So we'd have to lock the elevator, and we'd have to station a staff member. We'd have to pay somebody to stand at the ramp to make sure nobody under 18 goes up there, because that's just the reality. If you take a smaller library that's a single room, like Blackfoot, they just don't have an area where they could put adult-only area without extensive renovation. I mean, they could close their boardroom and lock it, but then they're going to have to buy the shelves, and they're going to have to, there's a cost involved in doing that. In our library, I'll take 30 seconds to tell you what we did in our library earlier this year. The board was very sensitive to this issue. They passed a policy. They said every parent has to come in with their ID and tell us which books they want their children to read. And we had it outlined, and the parents came in and said, this is okay. We want our kids to have access to the third floor. We don't want our kids to have access to the third floor. We don't check out adult graphic novels to anyone under 18, and we don't check out movies because we can't control the content of movies. And that has worked very well, and our patrons really like that. That's really all I've got to say, is that there just isn't a practical solution for the way the bill is written.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Wright? Representative Skog.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you for coming all this way to testify. I've been in your library. I like the layout. I like how it's put together and how it works. But I don't see that you have to make drastic changes as I read this bill to what you are currently doing. This bill only applies to what would be legally obscene materials. And I sincerely doubt you have much, if any, of that in your library. So that's just a comment, but you're welcome to respond.
Mr. Wright, would you like to respond?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you for the compliment. I'll pass that on to the staff. They work hard. And I'm not an attorney. I consult with the city attorney, and we consulted on last year's bill extensively. And that was kind of what we came up with, is that because we can't control, we have over 100,000 items on the top floor, so we would need to read those. And I can tell you, we have erotica in our library because people want to read it. There's been erotica in library since the Library of Alexandria. We control that. We hope that children don't read that, but we really rely on the parents, and we're trying to empower parents to make those decisions. Children range in maturity from, preschoolers who come into story time to kids who are 17. And we had a young lady come in. She was 17 years old and 50 weeks. And we told her, you got to come back with your dad or mom to tell us where you can. And she was not happy, but that's our policy. So I think, like I said, I'm not an attorney, but that's what our attorney is recommending.
Representative Coberly.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Wright, I'll ask the same question that I asked Ms. Burgess. Is there a policy in place in the Idaho Falls Library for patrons to ask for reconsideration of books that are in the collection? And if so, Could you describe briefly how it works?
Okay, so this is how it works. If you find a book that you think, let's say you come in, you find a book that we missed one. We try to keep our children's library really focused. We do have same-gender families in our children's library because we have staff, we have members in our community that are that way, and we try to serve everybody. But say you oppose to that, you would bring it in, you would fill out a form. We have a form you fill out. It says what's the name of the book, if you represent somebody, have you read the whole book? Do you like it? What don't you like about it specifically? You list that comes to me. I pick 3 other staff members. We read the material, we meet together, we discuss it, we make a decision. I communicate that back to you. If you do not like that decision, you can appeal that to the Board of Trustees. It goes to the Board of Trustees. There is a set format. You get 5 minutes to explain to the Board of Trustees why you don't like our decision. Staff responds, and then you get another chance to address the Board of Trustees, and then the Board of Trustees will make a decision in an open meeting at that time on whether the book stays or goes. And I will tell you from experience, if you come in and you tell us, I don't think this book belongs in the children's library, we will usually, I have never said no, we usually just move it to the adult collection because it makes it easier. It's still available, but does that answer your question, sir?
Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Wright. My question is, when you mentioned the new changes that the board implemented about some individuals would be restricted from certain areas, and they'd come in, their parents would check the box, they could do this. How is that any different than stopping some individuals from doing these things versus all minors?
So what we did is excuse me.
You're okay.
Just so excited.
It's new for everybody, and so don't panic in here. But we try to maintain protocol.
Thank you. So we required every minor's parent to come, or guardian to come in and make that decision. So we expired every card of anybody who was under 18. Their card expired on the day the board policy was adopted. And they could not check materials out until their parent or guardian came in and specifically told us, and we have some parents that say, I only want my children to access stuff in the children's library. And that's great. That's what's wonderful about our solution, I think, is it allows the parent to make the decision. Because I don't know your children. I don't know their maturity level. I don't know what you discuss in your home. Ideally, they'll show the chair a quick story. My daughter had a book assigned in school last year that she was a senior, and she read it. And she goes, Dad, there's some stuff in here I really don't like. And I said, well, let me tell you what you do, Emma. You close the book, you look at the author, and you say, I'm not reading that author anymore. It's that simple. Now, that's not going to happen to everybody, but to answer your question, it's different because we're allowing the parent to make the choice. We're not making the choice for them. We're not removing those parental rights from the parent. We're allowing them to do it, and I think that's important.
Any further questions? Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Wright. Welcome. I've appreciated your thoughtful contributions to this whole conversation. I suspect that I know the answer to my question, and so I'm going to ask a follow-up. And if I'm wrong, then you can correct me. But I would ask, do you believe that graphic sexual content is harmful to minors? And if so, what about it makes it harmful?
Okay, so I am not a psychologist, but I will tell you from personal experience. You ask a yes or no question, and it's not a yes or no question. If you have a child who's been abused, graphic material can be helpful to help them explain to a forensic interviewer what happened to them. If you have a child that's been molested, excuse me, it's helpful as a parent to have access to that material. So, I know the answer you're looking for, and yes, it can be, but it can also be helpful. And so that's why we allow parents to make those choices.
Any further questions? Representative Barbieri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too appreciate the thoughtfulness of your responses here. I'm just curious that if you came across material that you knew you were certain was harmful to minors, wouldn't you restrict that just naturally? Or would you go ahead and allow that to be accessible until a parent came in and said, I've got an objection with this?
We actually, so adult graphic novels, and that's mostly what was in front of the committee last year. Our library board, and this is not, our library board makes decisions for our library. I'm not trying to preach what should be done other places, but our library board has said no minor will check out an adult graphic novel. We just won't do it. They're shelved separately. If you took one and you tried to check it out, the system would forbid you from doing that. Now, if your parents want to come and get it for you, that's a parent issue, and that may be criminal, but that's not our job as librarians to provide material to the community.
So I have a question for you, Mr. Wright. Can you point to me the section where it's requiring you, section in the bill that's requiring you to post a guard in there and lock your, elevator, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, it says there in the bill, I don't have it in front of me, but there's a section that refers to the material will be shelved in an adult-only section of the library.
Okay, I'll try to look through that as we're going through other folks. All right, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony today. Next up, Rachel Utzen, followed by Heidi Robbins, Marcia Kerr, Kelly Reed.
I have something for the page here, and there's nothing obscene, so it's...
Okay.
Chairman Crane and members of the committee, I'm Rochelle Otteson from District 3. I'm representing my experience as a parent, homeschool mom, library member, current Idaho Library trustee, and board chair. I support this bill because children are frequently being harmed and corrupted, sometimes permanently, by materials in our schools and libraries, including 2/3 of my own children. Regarding libraries promoting prostitution, pedophilia, and bestiality to children, a board member once answered with the library mantra, "Children have a right to be exposed to everything." My library board has been trying to change our materials policy to protect children since June of last year. We've been officially threatened with multiple lawsuits. It's mind-boggling that adults demand children have access to sexually explicit materials, but they said we can't be stricter than state law, and the policy process is stymied. This bill is a win-win. Parents, children, and communities win, and it will help the reputation of our schools and libraries by helping them to be proactive and protecting children from the worst materials. The main thing I want everyone to remember, some fear this would put a bounty on our institutions. This is absolutely unfounded. I contacted librarians in many states that don't have the exemptions that Idaho has. All of them said that not having an exemption was a non-issue. I've distributed an email from a head research librarian in one of the non-exemption states, and she said that 1, there have been no charges for distributing such materials, and 2, it is cheap and easy to comply with the lack of exemption. Since it is cheap and easy, but the harmful books are rampant in some schools and libraries, it seems some are exploiting obscenity exemptions. Shouldn't responsible adults protect our vulnerable children, ensure accountability for those harming kids in society, and help libraries do better? If the parents think they can handle a topic or book, the parents can get it for them. But these books shouldn't be promoted or made available to innocent children from unsuspecting families. Please vote yes on HB 384. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there questions for Rachel?
Rochelle.
Rochelle. Are there questions for Rochelle? Thank you for being here today. Next up, we have Heidi Robbins. Heidi, welcome to House State Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. My name is Heidi Robbins. I'm a certified teacher librarian from Rigby. I am here to speak against this bill today. I am with the IEA. As a teacher librarian, my job is to teach and promote information literacy. A part of that information literacy is offering diverse books that represent people around the world and also people within my community. Every student that enters my library should be able to find a book that reflects their life and the lives of their family and friends. Book censoring, which is what this bill does, targets already marginalized communities, including the LGBTQ+ community. This group of students already has some of the highest instances of bullying and suicide and more. Having literature where they are represented can not only help them feel they belong, but can also teach their peers that they are not a demographic to be feared or shunned. They are human beings who contribute to society just like anyone else. I've had a student come into my library and in a whisper ask for a book with a gay protagonist. They were so afraid of the fallout that might happen if they were overheard by other students that they didn't dare ask out loud. We found a book that they loved. It was appropriate for their age, it was appropriate for their reading level, and it didn't have any pornography. It was a sweet book about a teenager trying to figure out life, just like every other teenager that comes into my library. The student brought the book back every couple of days to talk about what they were reading. And once they were done, they came back for another book and another book and another book. As they read, they became more confident in who they were. These books were a great fit for them, and every student deserves an opportunity to find that book for them. When I talked to my teenage daughter about this bill, she told me that her generation is very passionate about who they are, and they want to see themselves represented in their books. She told me that her peers need books that help them realize that they are not alone and that they can be who they are without fear because they see themselves in books. She also pointed out that she feels the need to read books about people who are different from her so she can understand them better. It helps her connect with her friends and her peers in ways she couldn't have otherwise. Instead of the state mandating what each library should or shouldn't have, we need to let our local library and school boards make the decisions about what is best for their community.
Thank you, Heidi. Are there questions for Heidi? Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Heidi. Just a quick question for you. You've talked a lot about marginalized communities and people being able to read books that describe people that have similarities to them. I'm curious to know, we talked earlier about this line 22 that's part of the definition of sexual conduct. And there is the use of the word homosexuality there. But as I read this line, it actually says an act of masturbation, homosexuality, sexual intercourse, or physical contact with a person's body. Goes on, details, okay? So the books that you're talking about, are these books that are describing graphic sexual or homosexual conduct?
Heidi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Young. In our policy, we do not have graphic sexual content because that is what our committee, we have a committee for our library that's made up equal parts parents, equal parts educators, and that is what we have decided for our community. I don't think any librarian is trying to give harmful materials to any student, but I think that there is a fear that if this is passed, that it's going to be taken to an extreme, and librarians are going to be so scared that we're not able to put those books out there that are not graphic. They just have an LGBTQ person in them.
Any follow-up? Heidi, I do have a question for you. You mentioned in there, you didn't say book banning, you used another term. Your concern, what was that?
Censoring.
Book censoring. Okay. So according to the sponsor, he's saying he's not censoring, he's just asking them to relocate it. Can you show me where the censoring is at or your concern lies inside the legislation?
Thank you, Chairman. Censoring is when we restrict what people have access to. I am in a school library, so I don't have an adult section. I have just my library, right? It's all for teenagers. And what one person deems as inappropriate is not the same as somebody else. So what I would suggest to my representatives is that we need to, instead of having a bill that the state mandates what can or can't be in a library, we should have local control. So we have library policies. We have all of these policies of what to choose and where to put it and what to have. And I think all libraries have those policies. And if they don't, they should, because as somebody who knows libraries will have that. So instead of having a state mandate, we need to have local control of what is appropriate for our community, because our communities are all different. We're a big state.
Certainly. Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none? Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Next up, Marcy Kerr. Marcy, going once, going twice. Okay. Kelly Reed. Okay. Kelly, state your name, who you represent today.
My name is Kelly Reed Hoyer. I represent myself.
Kelly, I'm sorry to do this to you. I'll let you stop right there, but I'll stop your time as well. Yeah. I'm going to have Zachary Borman up next, Shane Reichert, Paige Beach. Okay, we'll get some in case they're in the other rooms. We'll get them headed this way. All right, go ahead.
All right. I represent myself, my children, my grandchildren. In 2020, the Supreme Court ruled in the case of Rutan versus Rutan, we believe in protecting children from those who would destroy their innocence, exploit them for their own purposes. On the whole, parents are the best protectors of children and have the natural right and duty for the care, custody, and control for their children. In 1923, the Supreme Court found in Meyer versus Nebraska that the state statute forbidding the teaching of German language was impermissible due to encroachment on liberty, on the parents' liberty, according to Amendment 14, which protects it, the right to marry, establish a home, and bring up children. In 1925, the Supreme Court found in the case of Pierce versus the Society of Sisters that the Oregon state statute requiring children to attend public school lacked reasonable relation to any purpose within the competency of the state. Wisconsin versus Yoder, 1972, the Supreme Court held that Wisconsin's compulsory education law violated an Amish father's right to take his children out of school to finish their education in Amish ways at home. In this case, Chief Justice Warren Burger wrote, "The history and culture of Western civilization reflect a strong tradition of parental concern for the nurture and upbringing of their children." And finally, the right of the parent to make upbringing decisions, including education and what books they read, cannot be infringed on by the government. So as a parent, I have several choices for my own children. I can call the library and say, hey, I don't want my kid to read this book.
Can you wrap it up?
Yep, this is my last thought. I can call the library and say, I don't want my child to read these books, this author, this genre, and it is blocked from my child. Or more importantly, I can have conversations with my kids.
Thank you. Are there questions for Kelly? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Oh, sorry. Representative Scott has a question.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As a parent, now as a grandparent, and a fan of my local library, I keep hearing parents involved, and I am 100% on board with that. However, discouraging to me in our society is many children don't have parents that are engaged at all, and public school teachers know that, or they're just working so hard to make a living that they don't have time. So just as a comment, I count on my local library to keep watch on those kids for the obscene materials, and also my school library. So I don't know if you have any comments on that for the kids that really don't have engaged parents.
Kelly?
Engaged, not engaged. It is not your right as a government body to determine what the parent does or does not do. And I am sorry that it does not jive with our traditional ideas of what parents should do. But the fact of the matter is, you don't get to make that choice for me whether or not I'm engaged, nor do you get to decide based on what my child is checking out of the library whether or not I'm engaged. That's not up to you. It is my natural right. It is not one given to me by the government. And the Constitution forbids you from taking that right from me.
Thank you, Kelly. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Next up, we have Zachary Borman, Shane Reichert, Paige Beach, Mariana Cochran, Brian Ullman, Nina Beasley. It's kind of our order. Any of those ready to go? We'll take you, just tell me your name and we'll just take you as you're here.
Shane Reichert, Your Honor.
Shane?
Or Your Honor.
No.
Oh my gosh.
No.
You know, it's been a long time before I've spoken to a body, and it's usually a judge since I've changed roles.
All right, Shane, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Shane Reichert, and I am the General Counsel for the Idaho Education Association. And on behalf of thousands of members of the IEA, I'm here to testify in opposition to this bill. As you may anticipate, many educators have a plethora of reasons for why they want to oppose this bill. However, as my capacity as General Counsel, it's my duty to review it from a legal standpoint. Let me tell you, House Bill 384 raises significant concerns. Representative Gannon has already brought up some of those concerns, and part of that is overly broad restrictions. There's broad and vague language throughout the bill. As outlined in 6A2I, the terms normal and perverted used in the context of intimate sexual acts is used. And then in paragraph B on page 2, it discusses the quality of any material or any performance. These are just a few of the terms that raise legal concerns. There's also a bill, part of the bill contemplates a catch-all provision. These are typically used in an empowering way to bring frivolous lawsuits. From a legal perspective, the lack of clarity leads to subjective interpretations and arbitrary enforcement. As Representative Crane pointed out, the goal of this bill is to prevent frivolous lawsuits. Well, that doesn't always happen in case law because of the lack of clarity. What we see here is people are given an ability to bring lawsuits for frivolous actions because there is lack of clarity, and that's a problem. As this community may be aware, bills in other states throughout our country have faced legal challenges based on the First Amendment. Cases in Iowa, for instance, with respect to Senate File 496, it included language that stated any material descriptions or visual depictions of a sex act. It was temporarily blocked by a judge in Iowa. I would anticipate we would face legal challenges here in Idaho as well. Censoring is a slippery slope. One form of censorship could lead to broader restrictions on materials and ideas. Finally, if I can wrap up, it's important for this committee to understand that the $250 is not limited. It does include attorney's fees, it does not include attorney's fees, and it doesn't include limit actual damages. For these reasons, we ask that you deny and vote against this bill. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Shane. Are there questions for Shane? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned actual damages. What kind of damages might there be from a legally obscene book in the hands of a small child, if you know?
Shane?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Skog, that's hard to say. It's hard to quantify what those damages could look like. Obviously, every person might perceive a damage differently. You could foresee an individual who's very supportive of this bill and is very against the language that is included in a certain type of book and may attach that to some potential treatment by a provider, and they may ask for recovery and treatment for their child if they say the harm was a result of that book. Hopefully that makes sense.
Any further questions? Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you just mentioned that harm could potentially be the result of a book. When you talk about harm and therapy, what specific harm are you referencing?
Shane?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Young, I'm not saying it is going to happen. I'm saying a parent could allege that. I don't know what harm could come based off, I'm an attorney, not a psychologist. But what I can tell you is that frivolous lawsuits do come before the courts often. And oftentimes there's allegations that can't be substantiated, or they found an expert that will support their position. What I can also tell you is that harm can come from what we perceive as normal. For one individual, one person, one student, just reading a story about a family could be harmful to that student, just not the materials that you say are described in this bill.
Any further questions? Seeing none, Shane, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Marcy Kerr? Nope, no Marcy. Okay, we're passing on. Shane Borman? No Shane. Paige Beach? Shane, are you here? Paige, okay. Zach? Zachary?
Yes.
Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Crane, honorable representatives. My name is Zach Borman. I'm the president of the West Data Education Association. While I can tell you that definitively, based off of our internal polls, our educators and education support staff do not support this bill or any bill that encroaches on the responsible practices that we have in place. We believe that we have systems in place and trained professionals that are fully capable of addressing patron concerns with materials as they arise. I wanted to take my time today to address this issue, though, from my perspective as a parent of students in the West Data School District. When I look at this bill, I see you all potentially legislating a very particular parenting philosophy and pulling the rest of us along with you. This is surprising to me, considering the emphasis on personal freedoms in our state. While you may believe it is best to shelter your child from some of the more challenging issues until they are of age, I believe in a more scaffolded approach of building maturity in my kids. Maturity doesn't just happen once they're 18. Maturity is a hard-fought process that continues well into adulthood. I expect my kids to make mistakes. I expect their lives will put them in situations out of my control, and that they must be trusted to act on their instincts, and to help them learn and grow to and from these instances, I will be in constant communication with my kids to be transparent about my values and mistakes, to answer their questions openly and honestly, to have them understand that there are very real gray areas in life, and that when they make their choices they're going to make, they should do so with an accurate understanding of themselves and empathy for how those choices might affect others. I believe that our kids deserve increasingly larger amounts of autonomy based off of their nature, their aptitudes, their interests, and their goals. You can't hide water from a person until they're 18, then take them out to the ocean and push them off the boat expecting them to swim. You have to build a set of skills, help them understand the dangers, and let them practice maturity. Human sexuality in particular is strange and at times unpleasant and difficult to talk about, but that doesn't mean we need to pretend it doesn't exist until they are an adult. From my perspective, your method of parenting...
Zachary, your time's expired. Can you just wrap it up real quick?
From my perspective, your method of parenting and this bill produces shame, suppression, and ultimately unhealthy relationships with themselves and others.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions for Zachary? Representative Scott, followed by Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Zachary. My question is, you said that some parents believe in sheltering and others don't, and you kind of think that your children should be exposed to that. How do you find that balance when a librarian may believe that these books are appropriate for a 5-year-old of sexual acts, and a parent may think maybe 11-year-old that might be more appropriate? Where do you find that balance?
I can't speak to what's happening in public libraries. I can speak to what's happening in school libraries to a certain extent, and those books are not available to a 5-year-old at a school library. I'm sorry, Mr. Thank you, Chair and Representative Scott.
Follow up?
No, that's good.
Yes,
Okay.
I don't know. I hesitate to let you all operate under the assumption that all of these materials that we're discussing are accessible to kids of all ages, because they are certainly not in our public schools.
Thank you.
Representative Young, followed by Representative Coberly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Zachary, just to kind of follow along the same vein then, sounds like you acknowledge that graphic sexual content is inappropriate and harmful to a 5-year-old. Do you believe that graphic sexual content can be harmful to a 16 or 17-year-old?
Zachary?
Thank you, Chairman Crane. Representative Young, I think that different kids are capable of addressing and thinking about, kids are accessing this stuff whether you are aware of it or not, through their phones, through their computers, through various other means. And books in particular are probably the least of the concerns in this regard. And ultimately, as people have testified earlier today, if someone is drawn to that kind of material, they have questions that need to be addressed, and the materials that are selected for our libraries and stuff are selected responsibly by professionals for the overall intent of the content, not just picking and pulling specific instances out of books out of context and not understanding the larger intent of the work itself and interpreting that as harmful. I don't know. I don't agree. I would disagree with your definition of what is harmful and who is ready to address certain issues at various ages.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just to use some language directly from the bill. So content that appeals to the prurient interest of minors and that is patently offensive to the prevailing community standards as to what is appropriate for minors, or to point to the subsection B, has the dominant effect of substantially arising sexual desires. So we're not talking about something where it's just a little piece. Is that kind of content harmful to a 16 or 17-year-old?
Zachary?
Thank you, Chairman Crane, Representative Young. Prurient interest is such a subjective term. What one person finds as stimulating is entirely, each person is different. And I can only speak from my own perspective again, but this doesn't just happen when you're 18. People watching television and any kind of thing, lots of different things can interest or stimulate individuals. And I do not inherently think that that is harmful if that is done.
Representative Koberlik, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Borman, you're from West Ada School District.
I am.
So you're aware that West Ada has a sophisticated policy that can be accessed by patrons for reconsideration of books?
I am. I was, thank you, Chairman Crane, Representative. I was a part of the revision process of the book selection as well as the book reconsideration process last year. It is a very robust and very sincere effort to ensure that the materials that we select, as well as the materials that we retain, are relevant, and that there is a very accessible and understandable system for patrons that have concerns to go through, either at the building level, at the district level. Yes, I'm aware.
Thank you.
Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Borman, there was a reference to this prurient interest of minors. And I noticed that on line 36 through 38 of page 1, and I noticed that it says applying contemporary community standards. And that term is used in other in other parts of this bill. Does that seem to indicate that we're applying a community standard as opposed to what an individual parent or an individual person might view? And having written the policy in Meridian, maybe you could discuss that.
Thank you, Chairman Crane, Representative Gannon. I think that one of my concerns about the bill is that indeed an individual parent can roll into a district or a school and hand them a piece of paper saying, this is inappropriate, I demand that you take it down, and you have 30 days to do so, right? And then, but the people that are, we're actually kind of spitting in the face of our democracy and how we have elected our trustees. And they have appointed superintendents, and they have hired employees that are representative of the community standards, and we're subverting their power and giving it directly to an individual to determine what the community standard is, as opposed to those people that are democratically placed in these positions from quadrants of the areas in which they live to do that, to represent those community standards. And we're just subverting that whole system as it stands.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up will be Marcia Kerr, Marianne Cochran, Brian Allman. Come ahead.
I'm Paige Beach. I think
Paige,
I was
I mentioned you as well. So Paige, we'll take your testimony right now.
Okay. So my name is Paige Beach. I live in District 22, and I'm a children's librarian in Meridian. I'm here speaking for myself, not on behalf of my library. I have a master's degree in library science, and I've worked in Idaho libraries for 8 years. As was mentioned by some other people, my library has a strong request for reconsideration policy. It's been really thoughtfully developed. It's been formalized by our elected officials, our library board of trustees. It's been written by people who specialize in collection development policy. The form is very thoughtful. It encourages everybody to think of the work as a whole. It encourages them to answer a lot of questions like, what is the overall theme of the work? Are there any redeeming aspects of the work? Can you envision an audience that this work might have? That form then goes to our director and our board of trustees. We form a committee where everybody reads the entire work. We discuss it. We read professional reviews. We look at circulation data about it, and then we respond within 30 days. We can either remove the book or relocate it or leave it stand as it is. And we have relocated a lot of materials, and we have removed materials too. So we have these systems, and every library who has the means and the professional expertise will have the same policies. I've worked at a lot of libraries in the Treasure Valley, and we all have very similar policies. So we already have something in place. This bill introduces the $250 fine, and I keep hearing it called, it's not going to bankrupt any library, to which I'd like to ask, have you seen libraries' budgets? Because I am intimately acquainted with them. And it would, not to mention the fees of redoing an entire library. I work in a small branch that's just one room. We have no way to restrict the adult section and hire additional staff to then card people to see if they're 18. There's also no way for the library board and the people who've read the books to.
Paige, I'm sorry, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Is
To
there,
come
is
to
there
a
questions
decision.
for Paige? Representative Coberly.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Beach, so with your appeal process, your reconsideration process, I'm assuming then that patrons could request reconsideration for a number of reasons.
Yes.
Expletives in the book, for example, violence, extreme violence, those would both be reasons other than sexual content that folks could appeal.
Yep.
Paige?
Whatever they want. They could request for anything. I have helped various homeschool curriculums order books for them. And one thing I've noticed is that everything's offensive to somebody. There are people who don't want magic in their books, and there are people who don't want talking animals in their books. There's no just easy standard that's just patently non-offensive to anyone.
So Paige, I've heard Representative Coberly ask this over and over, and I haven't heard a library yet that doesn't have a policy. It sounds like they all have a policy. It's not working. These books still are coming up, and we're seeing last year we had books that were in Meridian libraries that have no business being in the hands of minors. So my
You're not
question
supposed to ask
is, if you
questions.
guys have these policies and you keep seeing this issue over and over and over, and we keep seeing legislation to deal with it, what is your solution to ultimately solve this problem?
Well, that's a tricky question because
I didn't mean it to be tricky.
No, you're
I'm a kind of a no-nonsense guy. I like to solve problems.
That's
Been
okay.
there
I'm
20
happy
years.
to answer it. So I've worked at a library for 8 years, 40 hours a week. That's a lot of library time. I've never encountered anyone who has seen a book that's objectionable, any parents or guardians approaching me as the children's librarian about a book that they found that's objectionable. I followed the Meridian hearings very closely. And all of the materials that were objected to were mostly in our adult graphic novel section. So they're already in our adult section, which this bill would then put them in. So what I am trying to say is that I am not seeing that big problem that you're seeing. What I'm seeing is people kind of fear-mongering a little bit. They'll take one section from an entire book, post that on the internet, and it will look really bad. Yeah, if I saw it on the internet, I'd go, oh no, that's a terrible material. It shouldn't be anywhere with anyone to have access to. And that kind of works us up, gets our emotions heightened. It brings people to complain to their legislatures, but I haven't witnessed that as a librarian myself.
So here's the tension that we have on our side of the diocese here, is that we get constituents that come to us and say, hey, look, I checked this book, my daughter, and I had one. My 15-year-old daughter checked this out, Representative Crane, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the young adult section, had no business being there, should have been in the adult section.
Okay.
So I understand where Representative Coberly is heading, but we're never getting this issue resolved. So I just didn't know if there's discussion or if you guys are realizing, hey, we're continuing to miss the mark here with our review policies. Maybe there needs to be an adjustment, or I didn't know if that conversation is taking place.
That's a good question, because everyone who I've met who works in public libraries, we're highly educated and we work for very little money. So we're there because we have a passion for serving the community, the whole community. We want to help everybody, regardless of our personal political opinions. We want to help everybody find the best book that they can. We want all of our patrons to be happy. We really do. So I think those conversations, if some patron were to bring that up to me and have a 15-year-old who checked out some stuff she didn't like, I would so be more than happy to meet with the patron, her parents, her guardians, and sit down and discuss selection tools that they can use to help find a better book. There's a lot of websites where you can see reviews, you can filter for things you don't want in your book. You don't want any sex, any swearing. You can go through and look at that stuff. And we would be happy to provide them with tools and resources to find the book that they want. But on the other hand, those books that 15-year-old checked out might be a good fit for a different 15-year-old. And
I'm sorry, Paige, these are not appropriate for any 15-year-old kid, but okay. Any further
and
questions?
I don't know what the books in
Okay,
question you're talking about.
yep. So now you kind of see the dilemma. So, all right. Next up, we got Brian Ullman, Marianne Cochran.
Crane to crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Brian Ullman. I live in Eagle. I am a member of the Eagle Library Board of Trustees. However, I'm not here representing them, but that does inform my opinion. I am speaking for myself. I believe that this is a good, solid bill that addresses a growing problem in our state. 50 years ago, your predecessors in the Idaho legislature, they defined in excruciating detail what kind of images and ideas that they consider to be harmful to minors. And that definition remains in statute today. It governs what children can have access to at bookstores, at convenience stores, anywhere but schools and libraries. Your predecessors worried that the definition would be used against certain educational materials, and so they carved out an affirmative defense for school and library personnel. And while this surely made sense at the time, I think things are a bit different now. Ideas and images that were once confined to seedy, adults-only bookstores are now being published and promoted directly to children. Several of the materials that have been found in the children's sections or the teens sections of schools and libraries fall clearly under the definition of what materials that are harmful to children in the Idaho Code. We're not talking about Huckleberry Finn. We're not talking about To Kill a Mockingbird. We're not talking about the Bible, as some have suggested. We're talking really about a few dozen books, many of which are graphic novels in both senses of the word.
Florida banned 300
vulgar and
books
pornographic
because of
imagery.
this bill.
I don't believe this is a First Amendment issue. This is no more about banning books than restricting cigarettes and alcohol to minors is about banning cigarettes and
Texas,
alcohol.
168
This is
books
simply
were
about saying that
banned.
some books are just not for children. My own library board, we are meeting later this month. We are going to look at our collection development policy, and I would like to see guidance from the legislature on this matter. I believe this bill provides a good foundation, a basic definition of what the state of
And
Idaho
those were
has
in
decided
county
should not be made
libraries.
easily available to children, and any marginal issues beyond
And
those
city
basic
libraries.
obvious cases can be handled at the local level. And I therefore urge the committee to send this to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Are there questions for Brian today? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Marianne Cochran, Nina Beasley. And after Nina, we are going to, one of the things that the chair likes to do is to allow for virtual testimony. So we are going to move to virtual testimony to try to get some folks that are outside the Treasure Valley an opportunity to weigh in on this legislation. So that, Mariana.
Mariana Cochran, District 3, representing myself. Thank you, Chairman Crane and committee. Does this teen book look like it's appropriate fare for minors? But we don't judge books by their covers, although kids do select books based on their covers. Instead, here's just a fraction of a sliver that I could carry in today from North Idaho, all from my local branch library in the minor section, filled with sexually explicit descriptions. Every flag represents one. That's just what I could carry. At North Idaho Library Board meetings, we had testimonials from a former career probation officer who asserted that his sex crime convicts told him they were often initially influenced by explicit books and movies. His quote, "This information is a tool for recruiting vicious child molesters." We also heard testimony from a convicted pedophile turned addiction counselor who bravely shared that his addiction started at 9 years old with written stories and that 99% of his clients were exposed to obscenity as kids. With seemingly daily reports of pedophilia now part of mainstream news, an ever-growing adolescent mental health crisis, increasing adolescent suicide rates, and explosive rates of porn addiction, it's undeniable that there's a correlation with the confusing and denigrating influences from the hypersexualization of minors. These books are just one of many sources, I grant you, but each of you can do something about this influence. The opposition to this and previous similar bills screech, but personal choice, censorship, book banning. This bill, however, is not that, because they are conveniently ignoring that SCOTUS has already ruled to allow libraries to prevent obscenity for minors and to prevent minors from obtaining access to material that is harmful to them. This bill is no small thing, with hundreds of Idaho public libraries housing millions of books, influencing hundreds of thousands of kids. You can make a huge difference for them. Please do the right thing. Please stop this degrading and destructive cycle for kids. Please advance this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Are there questions for Representative Gannon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Cochran, first, which specific library are these? Did you get these books from? And second, has there been any move to replace library trustees at an election, or if it's schools, replace school board trustees at an election?
Mariana?
Chairman Crane and committee, thank you for that question, Representative. So I'm from Rathdrum. All of these are from my Rathdrum library, and they're all came from the young adult section. This book was in the young adult section until the community was outraged, and our library did move it after much hubbub. So that your second question was, yes, where I live, our library board is elected, and we did have an election last year. And the two incumbents were replaced. However, in Coeur d'Alene, 15 miles from me, their library board is appointed. So, and the state has a combination for cities versus rural community libraries. Did that answer your question?
Brief follow?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Cochran. Pretty much, so you replaced the two library board members, and did they implement a policy to your liking, that to your satisfaction?
As Chairman Otteson described, Board Chairman Otteson, I am where she is. And they have been, the Board of Trustees has been working on this for almost a year.
Oh.
And so they have been stymied. The process is slow and painful. There is opposition within the library. You've heard similar testimony of what we're hearing up there.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Cochran. I'm just thinking, though, that if they control the board makes the decision, not the librarians. So what's stopping the board? Is there some law that is preventing the board from doing that? Or why can't the board act and implement the ideas that you're espousing today?
Chairman Crane, Representative Gannon. So the board sets the policy. They do not select books. Right? The library staff selects the book. Where I live, we have 7 libraries plus a bookmobile, so it's a consortium of libraries. There's a staff who does that collection development, supposedly in accordance with the policy. Right now, the policy has allowed all of this stuff. So the attempts to revise the policy are at play, but they are not succeeding so far.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Next up, final in-person public testimony, Nina Beasley.
I have excerpts from all the books that I read. Would you like to have them?
Hand them to Representative Holtzclaw.
I think Chairman Crane knows if they're for or against the bill, so he's finishing up here with people that are for the bill, I think. But that's my opinion.
Good morning, Chairman Crane and members of the House State Affairs Committee. My name is Nina Beasley. I'm a resident of Kootenai County. I ask that you please support House Bill 384. I want to remind this committee that we're talking about the sexual exploitation of minors through sexually explicit obscene materials that are in libraries and schools in Idaho. Research shows that wherever sexually explicit obscene materials are available, rape, murder, and child molestation increase. This means the risk goes up that one of my 5 children, one of your children, could be raped, murdered, or molested. That also increases the need for the death penalty and more prisons. That is not promoting the general welfare. The preamble to the United States Constitution states one of the purposes of government is to promote the general welfare and to establish justice. It is also instituted to secure our God-given rights to life, liberty, and happiness, according to the Declaration of Independence. Article 3, Section 24 of the Idaho Constitution states the first concern of all good government is the virtue and sobriety of the people and the purity of the home. The legislature should further all wise and well-directed efforts for the promotion of temperance and morality. If you remember, before taking office, you swore an oath to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Idaho, and to faithfully discharge the duties of your office to the best of your ability. We should not be taking taxpayers' money, my husband's hard-earned money, by force to purchase and distribute sexually obscene materials to minors. He doesn't go to work to pay for that. For these reasons, I ask that you please support House Bill 384.
Thank you, Nina. Are there questions for Nina? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. We're going to go to Twin Falls, Idaho, and pick up Karen Jensen. And then following that will be Jennifer Holmes in Post Falls. Karen, are you there?
Hey, Chairman, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. I have personally engaged in research delving into many books, likely hundreds, widely accessible in our public school and libraries across Idaho, not in just one isolated area. These materials seek to influence the minds of children with explicit sexual content. The abundance of objectionable material is considerable, and for obvious reasons, I cannot quote any specific content within my own testimony here. Regardless of the intention of the authors, the content of these books pervert the minds of our children, normalize behaviors which would hurt the children severely if acted upon, and substantially increase a child's vulnerability to sexual predators. As emphasized by Tim Ballard, children intended for sexual trafficking
and he's aligned
are conditioned through exposure to pornography to make them more compliant with the behaviors forced upon them by their captors. Again, regardless of the author's intentions, these books act in concert with sex traffickers intending to sexualize children, making it easier for children to be victimized.
Probably from
it is imperative that we take proactive measures and exert every effort to safeguard our tax dollars from endorsing conduct that may lead to sexualization and victimization of our children. By doing so, we aim to prevent
it's obvious
the development
that this,
of distorted
these people are biased and they want to bring back
consent and respect among our youth.
To Idaho.
If we refrain from taking action against this material, unwittingly or not, we are acting in a manner consistent with the desires.
Karen, can you wrap it up?
Of human traffickers. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Karen? And I apologize for the audio. We'll see if it gets better with Jennifer or not. So Jennifer Holmes is up next from Post Falls, Idaho.
Hello.
How you doing?
Oh, ready?
We're ready, but I'll tell you what, our audio is not good, and I don't know how to fix the audio situation. So speak as loud as you can.
Okay, I will. Good morning, Chairman and committee members. My name is Jennifer Holmes, and I live in Post Falls, Idaho, and speaking for myself. I'm here to request that you vote in favor of House Bill 384. I'm a former second grade public school teacher and homeschooling mom of 4. And as a homeschooler, we love the library. But one day, as my kids were looking at books in various locations of the library, I noticed the cover of a DVD with a picture of 2 men kissing. Not wanting my 5-year-old son to see that, I moved it out of his view to the top shelf. Then I contacted the library and requested that they remove that video from the kids section or the adult section. And I was told no, because it was my responsibility as the parent to monitor my children.
That's right.
Needless to say, I stopped going to that library. And as other sexually explicit books began to appear on the shelves in plain view, we stopped going to the library altogether. It's not just about minors checking out the books. It's about having sexually explicit material in the library on display where children can access it easily without or with their parent. I've seen many children and teenagers in the library without their parents. Yeah. I believe H. Bill 384 will be a blessing to parents, especially those who have more than one child. This bill will cause the library to be a safer place for children to explore without having their parent with them every second. And as a former public school teacher who couldn't monitor all 27 kids during library time, it will be a blessing to teachers as well. I believe this is a win-win bill. It requires relocation of material, not book banning. And lastly,
did
it
Mr.
does
Crane call
not
you?
take a parent's right of letting their child view sexually explicit material. So in conclusion, please support H Bill 384.
Why am I not
Thank
surprised
you.
at that?
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there questions for Jennifer? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Next up will be Heather Stout from Moscow, Idaho.
Ooh, all up in the northern panhandle. They want to create a separate state, state of liberty. It's where they got a lot of white supremacists.
Can you hear me?
And anti-government.
Yes, we can. Heather, go ahead.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman Crane and committee members. My name is Heather Stout, and I live on a ranch just north of Genesee, Idaho. I am speaking today not only for myself, but also as a member of the Fight for the First North Central Idaho Alliance in opposition to HB 384. I am a retired professional librarian with over 30 plus years in Idaho libraries. And I want to share with you today my story. As a young girl, my mother would drop me and my sister off at our local branch library to browse the stacks and check out the books we wanted to read, while she did the weekly grocery shopping. I still remember walking into the library. To the left was the adult section, and to the right was the children's section. Even to this day, I can see all the Little House on the Prairies, all lined up, all the Nancy Drews. Well, after I had read all the books I was interested in, I wandered over to the adult section to browse for something new. The librarian would not allow me access to that section. So when my mother picked me up, she asked me where all my books were. I told her that the librarian would not allow me into the adult section to look for the books. My mother marched back into the library and told the librarian that as my mother, she was in charge of what I could and could not read. And it was not the librarian's job to determine that. From then on, I was able to browse the entire library. What my mother stated all those years ago still applies today. Parents determine what their own children can and cannot read, not other parents, not library staff, and certainly not the Idaho legislature. This bill is unnecessary and complete government overreach. And please understand, relocation is banning as you are denying access. That's what happened to me. So please, vote no on HB 384. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather today? Seeing none, we're going to go to our final testifier today, Heidi Smith from Parma, Idaho.
All northern Idaho, isn't it? Parma, Idaho.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Heidi, speak as loud as you can.
Okay. Chairman Crane and committee members, I thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Heidi Smith, and I reside in District 9. I speak as a parent of recently graduated children and on my own behalf. Section 18-1514 of Idaho Code already defines sexually explicit material inappropriate to be shared with minors. Studies show that such sexually explicit material alters the structure and development of immature brains by damaging the development of prefrontal cortexes. This is the area of the brain critical for decision-making and impulse control. When damaged, children are more likely to act impulsively and to make rash decisions. This represents a clear and definite harm to minors. Section 1815 further states, and I quote, "Disseminating such materials to minors is a misdemeanor punishable by confinement in the county jail, not to exceed 1 year or by a fine not to exceed $1,000, or by both such fine or jail sentence," unquote. Unless, of course, you are a library or a librarian. Others have put together extensive lists of books which fit 18-1514 in numerous Idaho schools and public libraries in children's sections. Many of these have, in fact, been written to specifically target and groom children. Sharing such materials with minors is no different than breaking laws to distribute alcohol or tobacco to minors, both of which are more harmful to minors than to adults. If someone were distributing such substances to minors in a public setting equivalent to a library, we would be outraged. So why have we not had the same outrage?
Heidi, your time's expired. Can you wrap it up?
Sexually explicit materials. I would just close by saying it's past time that we quit exempting libraries as disseminators, and I urge you to support and pass HB 384 to the House for a vote.
Thank you. Are there questions for Heidi? Seeing none, that concludes our public testimony for today. Representative Crane?
I'm sorry, I know this is out of line.
Yeah, you're out of order. I'm sorry. And if you don't sit down, we'll ask security to remove you. Security, would you mind to go ahead and committee will go at ease for 5 minutes.
Uh-oh. Oh, boy.
Order. The House or the committee has under consideration House Bill 384. Representative Crane, you'll be allowed 5 minutes for closure today.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Again, just to go back over a couple of key points to wrap this up. There's no book banning and there's no book burning. We're simply codifying a relocation policy that creates a process for fair process for both parties that are involved. One side may want the materials and the other side may not want the materials. Both are taxpayers, both have a vested interest, both have different worldviews. What we have done with this legislation is come to a compromise. Meeting with members from the school, meeting with members from the library, meeting with members from the community, we've come to a place of compromise, and I think that this is a great bill to do that. We've heard a lot about parental rights. They have the right to go and check out that material. It's going to be in the library. It's going to be in a different section, and they can go check it out and go over that with their children. I believe that by allowing citizens to challenge a relocation, that's fair. That's what we should do, is allow them to go through that process. If they're questioning that, they have the right to go do that if they choose to do that. Again, going back to the question of who decides what's harmful to minors, we already decided as a state in 1972 what is and what is not. If you were to go and hand this material out to a kid on the street on 8th and Main, you're going to get a $1,000 fine and you're going to go to a jail for a year. What we're saying in this bill, $250 in damages. We had a request from the members of the school and the library folks that we make sure that we please put the Miller test in there, and that is in there. And I outlined that earlier, that we have prongs 1, 2, and 3 already in there. I was just at breakfast this morning in the cafeteria, and a senator who actually voted against House Bill 314 came up to me and said, "Man, I read your bill. It's good." And I was like, "Yeah, it is. It's really good." And he's like, "I think we can come to an agreement on this." It's a good bill. It's taken 2 years of talking with folks to get to this place. It is a good compromise. It is a good bill.
American
I actually
Legislative
ran this by a
Exchange
National
Council.
Legal Counsel group. They said, "Representative
Yeah, the
Crane,
Koch
this is
brothers
the
really
best
like this
library
bill,
bill
right?
in the country." We have something to be proud of. We've done a good job. We've met with people. We've
Koch
made
industry.
concessions where we needed to. Everybody got a little bit of something that they wanted. So I just asked Mr. Chairman and committee that we send this to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you, committee. House Bill 384 is properly before the committee. Representative Coberly, Representative Gannon, and then Representative Alfieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask a question of the
Certainly.
representative?
And Representative, you can take your seat and answer them from your seat if you'd like.
So, Representative, I think we established that there are policies in place in a number of school districts and libraries around the state. And my question is very simple. Would this new section of code override any of those procedures that with which it's in conflict in schools and libraries across the state?
Representative Crane.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Coberly, This is simply pertaining to a 30-day written relocation notice. So this would have to be put in place. Again, there's no formatting of that form. I didn't outline that. But it is very clear that, hey, you're going to have a 30-day relocation form at the front desk that pertains to the material. That's what I got outlined
He's
here.
going to vote.
But they could still have their policies, I think is what his concern is.
Yeah.
They can still have their policies in place.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, you could still have your policies in place.
Follow-up, please.
Yes, certainly.
Unless I'm assuming it conflicts with what's in the reconsideration policy in the school district or at the library.
Representative Crane.
I would agree that that's probably true.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was just going to make a suggestion, and that is that since we had so many people here today with very concerned and people online with opinions that they wanted to share with everybody, I was wondering if maybe we might postpone a vote till tomorrow and allow them to submit in writing any of the public to submit in writing their opinions and viewpoints, so that at least they participate. Because I know, and as the committee knows, here at the legislature, with all the bills that we have, we only have so much time, and we can't have 200-300 people testify. It's pretty tough. But I was thinking maybe if we gave a period of time where those who didn't have the opportunity to submit their testimony in writing, and then maybe we vote tomorrow, or that we'll be meeting every day. And I just throw that out as a suggestion to the committee.
So, Representative, the bill's now properly before the committee. It's the committee's decision what they want to do with the bill. I just told you we'll take action on the bill. My job is just to run the process. So whatever action the committee chooses to take on the bill is what the action is going to be, but we'll take action today on the bill. Representative Alfieri.
Mr. Chairman, I move to send House Bill 384
Choo-choo,
to the floor
the
with a pass
railroad is
recommendation.
running through.
Committee, we have a motion to send House Bill 384 to the floor with the due pass recommendation. Is there discussion on that motion? Representative Gannon.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So I would make a motion that a substitute motion, that we hold the bill until tomorrow for a vote, time certain, for a vote, so that allow those who would like to submit written comments at least a day to submit them.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Gannon. Any further discussion on a substitute motion to hold House Bill 384 in committee one legislative day? Not, Secretary will call the roll. The substitute motion is to hold House Bill 384 in committee for one legislative day.
Chairman Crane,
No.
Representative Young,
No.
Representative Palmer, Representative Barbieri, Representative Holtzclaw, Representative Scott,
No.
Representative Andrus,
No.
Representative Skog,
No.
Representative Alfieri, Representative Crane,
No.
Representative Gannon, Representative Coberly.
Motion has failed. The committee will now return to the original motion to send House Bill 384 to the floor with the due pass recommendation. Secretary will call. Is there discussion on that motion? Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think that the bill has some very broad and general language provisions, and that this makes the bill right for legal disputes, legal abuse, and a considerable expense to a library. I think it also is, we need to have instead of legal decisions and using the legal system for lawsuits, I think it's better that we accomplish and address these issues, which seem to be largely political, at the local level through our library boards, such as the Rathrum Library. If they're having a problem, elect new members as trustees. And if somebody doesn't want to follow if an employee isn't following those rules that the trustees lay down, then the employee would be replaced. I mean, that's the way we would do that this way a governor would do it, it's the way a president would do it, it's the way our system does things. I am concerned that the bill does emphasize the lawsuit, the private lawsuit, the private attorneys and all that, instead of emphasizing the injunctive, paragraph 5 on page 3, line 21 through 25, which allows a injunctive relief, which I think is more appropriate. There you have a public person who represents the entire community, prosecutor, for example, who seeks injunctive relief, and we're not talking about private attorneys and all the expenses that are involved in that. So for that reason, I have to vote against this bill.
Okay, certainly. Thank you, Representative Gannon. Is there further discussion on the motion to send House Bill 384 to the floor with a due pass recommendation? Seeing none, the Secretary will call the roll.
Chairman Crane,
Aye.
Representative Young,
Aye.
Representative Palmer,
Aye.
Representative Barbieri,
Aye.
Representative Holtzclaw,
Aye.
Representative Scott,
Aye.
Representative Andrus,
Aye.
Representative Skog,
Yes.
Representative Alfieri,
Aye.
Representative Crane,
Aye.
Representative Gannon,
No?
Representative Coberly.
No.
Motion passes 11 to 2. Committee, that completes our work for today. We'll stand adjourned.